Welcome back. You're watching Sunday edition here on KTN News. Let's take a look at what's making headlines in the newspaper dailies this morning. My guests are here with me. Professor Oiritumbo is here, governance experts, as well as Dismas Mokua, political analyst. And joining us from Kisumu County, he really loves the county of Kisumu. He doesn't like staying here in Nairobi. It's code strategist Jared Okello will also be with us here on the show. Many thanks for joining us. Good morning, gentlemen. Let's start with the Standard on Sunday. It is a very bold splash, we call it. Drugs, U.S. targets key Raila and Uhuru allies. Of course, a story by Daniel Wesangula and Zao Musau. Of course, talking about just a week after the Akasha brothers were extradited to the U.S. A story which has continued to draw various reactions from different Kenyans, depending on where somebody stands. The spotlight has turned on prominent Kenyans in business and politics named adversely in past reports. Government and diplomatic sources told the Standard on Sunday of renewed pressure to deal with suspected drug barons. We also did hear Uhuru Kenyatta when he was at the coast last week while he was declaring the Makonde, the 43rd tribe of Kenya, saying that, talking tough on this drugs menace. Some people have been named, or their pictures here, and they are key political figureheads. What is your take on this?
Many things. Number one, I think one has to congratulate the managing editor for the Sunday Standard for having the energy to do this kind of a story.
Understand Dennis Galava.
Yeah, Dennis Galava. Understand in other economies, especially in Latin America, when you do this kind of a story, you find yourself in a tight corner answering several questions, and not by the government authorities, but by the cartel leaders. They'll come looking for you. And I think Dennis Galava is on the right path, and one wishes him well. But now, looking at the story, the pertinent issues, number one, is whether or not Kenya has got a functional justice system. That the two brothers who are now facing issues in the US, they've spent most of their time in Kenya, and the Kenyan authorities know them very well, but nobody was able to take any action on them. Meaning that our justice system in Kenya is almost as good as dead, and the only people it serves is the interest of the ruling class and the very poor. In Kenya, if you steal chicken, chances are that you're going to be prosecuted in a very short space of time. But these folks have been around for a while, and it seems like they're able to compromise the system. And again, that takes you back to what the president said at some stage, that he'll never allow during his reign for any Kenyan to be prosecuted outside the Kenya judicial system.
Right.
So again, one wonders what happened this time round, that he actually allowed Kenyans to be prosecuted in the US. And the DP said yesterday that the presidency was aware of all these happenings. So really one wonders whether Kenya will respect the rule of law and order, and whether or not we actually value our citizens. Because on a normal day, it's really not a good idea to allow a Kenyan citizen, whether he's of African origin, English, Arab, whatever it is,
yes,
to be tried in another territory. Again, maybe we go back to establish whether or not the cartels have got absolute control over our systems. Because right, again, I recall the county, the regional commissioner in Mombasa, Mr. Marwa, saying that if there's an OSPD within his area who is going to try and protect these people, is going to be transferred to another place. Again,
one wonders. Just hold your thought for a moment. Let me get the prof's thoughts on this. What do you think? A lot of Kenyans have been saying what Dismas is asking: why allow Kenyan citizens to be tried to be extradited to the U.S.?
Actually, there are many things that could be said about this particular headline and the ongoings. One of them is the fact that the political landscape is extremely tricky right now, and a certain amount of pruning is necessary to allow certain strategic arrangements to be fulfilled. For example, if you look at the people involved in this, a large percentage of them are political players, all right? You see people from CORD, you see people from Jubilee. It's believed also that a lot of the money that allows certain people to be effective politically is drug money. No evidence has been adduced in most of these cases, but that is the belief. So
where does this belief come from? You're a biochemist. You're very critical in analysis.
It comes from several sources. One, people get into politics. There are people in the Kenyan political networks who are barely able to wear shoes. Now, they go through some transformation. Overnight, they have money to fund massive. For example, one of the characters named in this picture is a person I knew 5-6 years ago. He barely could pay his rent. Then one week, I saw him with a Prado, another one with a Range Rover, another one. So quite clearly, there had been a harvest. During that time, I also saw this person frequently in the evening in the company of security agents. And he'll be walking around very comfortably surrounded by 6-7 of these people. Secondly, the next suspicion is from the fact that there are certain trading channels, particularly the ones emanating at the port, that the political gurus fight over. Which means they are high yield products or activities that they are trying to dominate.
All right.
3, very often, the influential political players in both camps, you will find that they quickly align themselves with these nouveau riche, the recently acquired.
The new money.
Yes, the new money. So which means that there are several grounds for suspicion, and I've gone very carefully, no names, but if you look at the names that are there, you will see that what I'm saying fits the bill.
All right, let's find out what Jared says about it. Jared, good morning. I'm sure you've been following the conversation and you've taken a look at the Standard on Sunday. What do you think about these names that have been mentioned adversely reported here on the Standard as persons of interest?
Well, good morning, Ben, and good morning, my two panelists in studio, Professor Tumbo and my brother Dismas. Well, as Dismas has said, it calls for courage to come up with such a headline in a reputable daily such as the Sunday Standard. And I also would want to join him in congratulating the editor who had the tenacity and courage to have that published. It is true that every Kenyan is concerned that the president can allow 4 Kenyans to be taken out of our borders in order to be tried in the U.S. Just at the very elementary, you saw from the dailies when these 4 landed in New York, and they were literally chained both hands and feet, and they were treated with a lot of, such an inhumane manner that does not pass the threshold of what is espoused in every constitution, that one is assumed or presumed innocent until proven guilty. The handling that we saw of our brothers in the U.S., regardless of the degree of evidence leveled against them, was totally inhumane and is basically unacceptable. Ben, you have to remember that at the moment we have 4 Kenyans with warrants of arrests on their heads, wanted at the ICC to answer to charges of, influencing witnesses over cases that were pending at the ICC. There has been a Mickey Mouse game played on them that no one out of the 4 has gone to the Netherlands to answer to those charges. So therefore you ask yourself, is the president speaking from one side of his mouth, whereas he handles other issues differently? And I think, as the Standard has alluded, there are certain key personalities who have been perceived to be a thorn in the flesh of the president's, governance, whom I want to believe are the target in this kind of scheme. And if certain Kenyans are going to be dragged all the way to America to answer to charges, whereas others would be shielded using government instruments, then I think we are getting everything wrong. Just a while back, barely a year ago, the president witnessed the bombing of a container that was perceived to be carrying cocaine and heroin. You know, all of a sudden, the container did not have a bill of lading. It did not have an invoice. It did not have, donation certificate or a point of origin, and did not have names of beneficiaries. But the container was bombed in the seas. So if that kind of evidence could not take anyone to court, we ask ourselves, what degree of evidence do they now have that will stand trial in New York? But again, you ask, does that therefore pour cold water into a judicial system, Ben?
Allow me to ask you this. Ben. Let me be the devil's advocate here. And a lot of people, you're comparing what's happening with the Akasha brothers with the ICC process. But somebody would say that it's the same thing, really, because no Kenyan court has the capacity to deal with international crimes and crimes against humanity. That's why the Ocampo 6 were taken to the Hague-based court. And do you think that Kenya has the capacity to deal with the drug menace, given the many times that allegations have been made of suspects interfering with the court proceedings and bribes and threats being mentioned in that? Do you think Kenya has the capacity to deal with the drug menace? And that is a question, directed to all Kenyans who are saying that no Kenyan should be extradited to the U.S., no matter the amount of evidence level against them.
Well, Ben, firstly, we have to dig deep into our history and get to know why in the year 2002, the Rome Statute was created and hence domesticated within the Republic of Kenya. If you read the Rome Statute under Article 7, it puts certain thresholds that must be met for a case to appear before the ICC. It again goes further to enumerate what stands a trial before the ICC. Mass murder, deportation of population, a genocide such as the one we witnessed in Rwanda, the mass murder that happened here within our borders in the year 2007, 2008, those are the crimes against humanity that attract the intervention of the ICC, and particularly with the prosecution to investigate and hence prefer charges against perpetrators. It doesn't talk about issues of drugs, because even when the ICC was being created, of course, with the Rome Statute as the guiding document, they knew that there are certain cases that cannot be handled by regimes, particularly the incumbents in various countries. Drugs, I would say, is a very simple thing that with evidence, and we have seen this happen. A drug is a drug, be it marijuana, be it, cocaine, heroin. Once you present credible evidence, cogent evidence before a court of law here within our land, the judiciary has the capacity to prefer charges against these people. But again, you look at perhaps people who trade in high degree drug, the ones that are commonly called drug lords, and you tend to think, therefore, that they have the capacity to influence the judicial process. That then becomes an isolated case. But I think our judiciary, particularly with the incoming of the new Chief Justice, and he has more times than number, said categorically that they will rely on evidence while passing judgments. I think we have what it takes within this country to prefer charges on the drug laws. And that is way, way far from what happens when one is presented before the ICC, Ben.
Right. All right. Thanks, Jared. Very good points. But what do you think, Dismas? Do we as a country have that capacity? The DEA in the United States struggles with Mexican drug lords. Does Kenya have the capacity to deal with any kind of drug lord?
Ben, it would be a tragedy that about 52 years later, we have no capacity for law and order institutions. It's really unacceptable. And one then would imagine that Kenya is a banana republic, that the instruments of law and order do not work. And assuming And it is a sad day for Kenya if you actually come to that conclusion that we have no capacity to try drug lords or drug barons, whichever name they use. But assuming we don't have that capacity, the US and the UK, we've got the mutual assistance programs, and these nations are more than generous to give us support to ensure that our local infrastructural systems are able to try this kind of cases. So one would imagine then that it's up to Professor Githu Muigai to trigger this kind of mutual assistance programs, to try these people locally. And for me, I would imagine that it's the government which is giving this thing a white bath, because they know if you have very solid structures, a number of their associates or beneficiaries may be affected. If you recall the chicken gates issue at the IBC, it took a very short space of time for the matter to be sorted out in the UK. And in Kenya, we are still tiptoeing around the issue. One would imagine that the president has got the unique chance. When he says that he respects law and order, if we don't have the internal capacity, then he can seek that external support and have those institutions working in Kenya. If you go to the coastal region, some of the people who've had the misfortune of using these drugs are just lying around. You know, an entire generation. People are just wallowing in a miasma, one would say, of drugs and poverty. Yet, we have these names. I recall a number of times the names have been discussed at the National Assembly. If Dennis Galava has got access to this information, then one would assume President Kenyatta has this information and his deputy president has this information. So they must really reassure Kenyans that they're actually running a nation and they're not running a banana republic by getting external assistance. I suspect our ambassador in Britain, if he calls the State Department or if he calls Donald Trump and he says, we need the DEA to come to Kenya and give us some technical support, they'll be more than happy to give us that support.
Rather than extradite Kenyans.
Yeah.
All right. Here mentioned as persons of interest, Prof, 3 businessmen, 2 former members of parliament, 2 sitting governors, 1 senator who wants to be governor, 1 member of parliament. Why can't Kenya, fry the big fish, so to speak?
It's very, very simple. The big fish are the power brokers. In this country, you can safely say that the political establishment, whichever side you are on, has been for many years a beneficiary of the drug trafficking and using business. And the people are looking at it from the point of view of the political cost. For example, in my view, when you see this, part of the problem is the government does not want the pot to break in their hands. They would like this thing to happen out there and say, si wana kesi ingine pande ile, pale, not here.
All right.
Now, 3, there is a historical angle to this. If you look very carefully, the bulk of the drug business has been related to Mombasa Port. Historically, it's been related to Mombasa Port, which means that that is a high-density availability area, a high-density user area, a high-density dealing area, and most of the damage, like Mogwa mentioned, is at the coast.
All right.
Now, the government is so busy chasing the coast vote that you don't want damage to be done there so that they appear the bad boys.
All right.
So the decision is political other than legal.
All right. And it being political, this must very quickly, as we move out of this, it touches on both sides of the political divide, the names that have been mentioned. Does that mean there is a genuine effort to deal with this, or is this purely political?
If there was a genuine effort, we will not be having that kind of a headline. And if there was a genuine effort, the people mentioned in that headline would be serving time behind bars. So really there is no genuine determination from the government of the day to crash on these cartels. And I think Kenya as a nation, our political leadership, the political elite, has been held hostage by the cartels. That's why they cannot make movements. That's why they cannot make directions. And I think President Kenyatta probably needs to organize a quick visit to the Philippines and speak to President Duterte and understand how he's managing the drug business. Well, President Duterte has been accused at the international level of abusing the rule of law and order. But at least he's killing the drug lords. He says as soon as he's got evidence, he's going to smoke you out. And he's getting a lot of recognition. and people are saying that this is the right thing to do. Of course, we need a similar thing in Kenya, provided it's anchored on some evidence. Because I suspect for President Duterte, you may not necessarily be a drug lord, but if you is a political enemy, doesn't like you, he'll probably put you in the mix and smoke you out.
All right.
But I really think that the president, instead of just going to Mombasa and asking for votes, because majority of the people who in fact are supposed to vote for him have been affected by these drugs. They don't know what is happening in the nation. And I think really the buck stops with him. He must offer genuine leadership instead of addressing roadside rallies and said that Kenya kumeka mota kukaliki. We should see some of these people serving time.
All right. Let's move away from this. Of course, it's a big story, the big splash on the Standard on Sunday. You can check it out by grabbing a copy of your Standard newspaper. Let's move to page 8 of the same newspaper very quickly and analyze what's happening with the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC. An interview by Nzao Musau again with the IEBC chairman, that is Wafula Chebukati, who says we are running out of time. And this, of course, alluding to the timeline that IEBC has been having. Some of them have not been met. But so far, how would you, of course, this is a final week, I think, of the second final week of the mass voter registration, the second and final registration exercise. How would you say we are doing, Prof, in terms of registration and the IEBC's mandate in running these elections?
I think that there are several challenges that are responsible for the low voter turnout and for the management of the systems in preparation for the election. One, it's important to understand that the ordinary voter that is being asked to register in this country is absolutely disgusted with the leadership that is being provided. And we're not talking about Jubilee or CORD. We're talking about across the line, where the national government of Jubilee is basically doing its own business using government systems. The governors, including many, almost the majority of those in CORD, are also busy using the county government systems to do their own business. So there is no motivation for the voter to go out there and stand in long queues in the sun. Two, at the moment, there is a cat and mouse game going on. One group is trying to create opportunities for fraud. Another group is trying to say, look, there is, let's try and seal the loopholes of fraud. Now, on both sides of the divide, you can't say any of them is innocent. There is this tendency to cry that so-and-so is messing something up, when in fact, you are personally at that time guilty of that particular offense. So one of the problems Chebukati is having is that the system is not, the healing or the rehabilitation of the electoral process is not being allowed to run a normal course. And the idea is each side is trying to get advantage over the other.
Chebukati says the IEBC is 50% ready, saying they are trying to implement some of the processes that they found already being implemented. 50% ready. How would you describe the relationship between the new commissioners and the political class?
Well, for me, maybe three things. Number one, Chebukati shouldn't be coming in the open and telling us his problems without giving us solutions. Because the reason why he applied for that position, and one would assume that he had actually done some audits to understand where IEBC is and to understand his job description. So for the ordinary voter, for poor Wanjiku in Kenya, we are not interested in knowing the problems or the challenges he's facing. It's supposed to be giving us a roadmap. It's supposed to be telling us these are the systems that we are creating which are predictable so that we have a very credible election. But the idea that is coming in the public and crying, behaving like a member of a civil society that is 50% ready, then what does he expect the normal Kenyan to do? So that's the first thing that he must address. And then number two, there have been a lot of concerns raised. And again, maybe at this level, you need to give him a pat on the back. Because Isaac Hassan did not tell us of the multiple registers, the duplication of IDs, but at least it's come in the public and accepted that about 128,000 people have got multiple registration, which is a very good idea. However, he's not had a deliberate effort to meet with the political parties, to meet with the key stakeholders.
Is that a good thing?
No, that's horrible. Because, the biggest stakeholders in Kenya are the so-called political parties, which are the special purpose vehicles. So he has not met with them to tell them that these are the challenges I've had in private, not in public, and these I'm trying to sort them out. For instance, how can it happen that retired President Moi, his ID has been used to register 10 voters elsewhere. How does it happen to retired President Kibaki? Then what happens to a normal Kenyan? You know, these are the small issues that he addresses in a media conference over a cup of tea, but you know, which leaves Kenyans nervous. Because one begins to imagine President Moi is not your normal citizen. He's not a normal Kenyan. But if you can have President Moi going to the polling station on August and he's told that, excuse me, sir, you cannot vote, looking at his stature, then what happens to poor Dismas Mokua or Professor Tumbo here? What are we going to do?
Right.
And you recall the elections is won by 50% plus one. So this one vote is what he needs to address with a lot of interest.
All right, Jared, you are part of the political class. What is your relationship with the new IEBC Commission and the Secretariat that has been, of course, working all through the months? Is everything, is it all systems go?
Well, thank you, Ben. The synonym I in the initials IBC stands for independence. That means it should be devoid of any encumbrances or in any kind of interference that can come from either the political class or the Kenyan citizenry. The flip side, therefore, is a disaster. That therefore prevents people from rigorous scrutiny over transactions being done within the IEBC. But again, coming down to that independence, that is why the other commissioners who went home had to exit the scene, because they were presumed to be very close to the Jubilee government and many a times defending Jubilee positions on certain matters that touched on the credibility of elections. So I tend to think that no political party, no coalition, and no politician should be leaning towards the electoral body in order to gain from the exercise that they are going to carry out in the year this year 2017 on the 8th of August. Now that aside, we do know that there are certain things that were set, most of which are now backtracking in terms of time. We had the voter registration exercise. There will be the compilation of the voter register. Then there will be political parties presenting nominated leaders from the MCAs all the way to the Senate. After that, there will be parties carrying out the nomination, their own nomination processes. And the law is very clear that 45 days before the general election, names of nominees from political parties running for various seats must be presented to IEBC for clearance. So all those, from the look of things, we are not on time, and certain fundamental decisions must also be made. But most fundamentally is the mere fact that we have to procure certain electoral gadgets and electoral materials. You remember from our last elections, 6 months to the election, procurement of BVR machines had not even begun. And that kind of rush, which involved the government to move in, had to spend 87 million shillings to procure those gadgets, even when the actual price of those materials were just 34 million shillings. So we do not want to see a situation where IEBC will be used for patronage and corruption and hence become a fertile ground. Things must move in tandem. And just as my brother Dismas has alluded, all stakeholders must get involved. If there are certain things that will be shrouded in mystery, certain things that will be swept under the carpet, only to come to the surface when the ship comes to the shore, then I don't think we will be doing justice to the Kenyan people, who are just but waiting to see what will happen on the 8th of August 2017. And Kenyans are not going to accept anything less than a free, fair, and a credible, verifiable process, Ben.
All right, thank you, Jared. Yes, Prof. Your final thoughts
about two small points that I would like to make. One, considering that the outgoing IBC was accused of all sorts of improprieties, I expected when Chebukati and his team come to do a situational analysis, a diagnosis. What are the key significant issues that are likely to adversely affect the election? And then after that, convert those into opportunities for solving these problems and therefore present a work plan. Now, I'm really worried because of the fact that he's beginning to look like he's giving knee-jerk reactions to any queries that come. Now, if he had prepared a work plan so that at every stage he's briefing the nation when a milestone has been achieved, then we would be saying, look, these guys are working differently from the previous ones.
All right.
But now...
All right, let's see how that plays out. Of course, the last few days of the final mass voter listing exercise, the IEBC has been targeting between 4 to 6 million new voters. Our last story here on the Standard on Sunday, page 19 of the Standard on Sunday, page 19, the weekend review. It's a review of course, we'll talk about a lot about the National Super Alliance in the next hour, but let's talk about what Jubilee are doing. Specifically, Deputy President William Ruto leaves friend and foe gasping for breath in tight race for votes. And the Standard on Sunday is reporting that the Deputy President has done a marathon tour of 16 counties in 14 days, making as many as 23 stops daily. What is your analysis of the Deputy President's work rate and efforts?
Well, talking about 23 stops, I think that's an exaggeration. A day has got 24 hours. So really, I don't know whether it's also nocturnal. But you have to give credit to the DP Ruto that he's done good work and is able to move from one place to the other. And those are some of the benefits of being an incumbent. Because when the president or his deputy want to move, all they need to do is to tell the bureaucrats serving under them to come up with their own schedule. So they're never worried on how they're going to finance their choppers, how they're going to finance the voter mobilization or everything. And he's done a very good job, and he needs a pat on the back. And also Jubilee has had a very solid strategy for voter registration, unlike CORD or NASA. Because I think CORD or NASA probably, they're behaving as if they were not aware that we are going to have voter registration at some stage. So they've been caught, dead asleep. So the president and his deputy are doing a very good job because they've got a structure which mobilizes up to the village level. And they've appointed people who ensure that everybody who is above the age of 18 is able to register as a voter. And the case has been made all the easier by Major General Kaiseri when he told the former provincial administration to go the extra mile and ensure that everybody who needs to get an ID gets an ID, and they're facilitated to make sure that they register as voters. So he's done a very good job. But however, all is not lost for CORD or NASA. They've got the next 10 or so days for them to up their game. But on this one, Jubilee really deserves a pat on the back. But of course, they're doing this voter registration and mobilization with making one assumption, that everybody they ask to register as a voter is actually going to be in their basket. So it's not the case that everybody who's been registered today, say in Kiambu, is actually going to vote for Jubilee. The converse may be the case.
All right. The Deputy President is unrelenting. This is what this story is about on the campaign trail. Going into the electioneering period and the campaign period that, of course, is almost fully fledged right now, the opposition seems to have several generals, if you can call it like that, campaigning for whoever the flag bearer will be. But on Jubilee side, it seems to be only the Deputy President. Doesn't Jubilee have other generals to help him out?
No, the Jubilee government, all right, is Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. All the others are their cronies, everybody else. Now, if you look at, first of all, I would like to recognize that that work rate means there is a cause. There is a cause he is trying to fulfill. If you look at the stakes for him, it is extremely important that Jubilee wins this election so that he can get more appropriately positioned to contest the 2022 election. So if Jubilee was to lose this, he would be the biggest loser. So the level of commitment is commensurate, all right, with the rewards that are likely to accrue. Now, if you look at the way the Jubilee government is structured, it is Ruto bringing Rift Valley and Uhuru bringing Mount Kenya. Now, everybody else, this agreement was done by two the chief of political staff in this case, and then there is a deputy. Everybody else is an employee. Now, at the moment, it is seen that if you send a lesser individual, people think that you don't value them enough. When you make a personal appearance, you create the required
Will that
impact.
work for Jubilee or against them? The fact that it's only the two, as you say, rather than a lot of people.
It is not working for, in fact, what is working for Jubilee is the government bureaucracy. You see, they unlike CORD, they already have in-house people that they are using to reach the people. Now, CORD doesn't have the same arrangement. CORD, what basically has done is that in a CORD, nobody really has power. Everybody has influence over a small sphere.
Ben, outside the president and his deputy, there is the Major General Kaiseri, and the entire
Who is
public
supposed
service.
to be not political.
It's supposed to be apolitical. It's supposed to give instructions which cover the entire nation, but obviously it's not doing that. I recall in one rally, he was actually telling the chiefs who were gathered that ensure that people from the Jubilee strongholds register as voters, because if they don't, all of you are going to be fired, and I'm also going back to take care of my cows. And you know, when the minister in charge of Interior tells you that if you don't assist Jubilee in voter registration, I'm going to fire you, that's something you take seriously. And then we have the political appointees, those ones who are in office simply because of the benevolence of the president and his deputy. Those ones are doing a lot of work below the radar. If you go to the offices today, or rather tomorrow, of all the political appointees, all of them are not in office. They are out doing voter registration because they know if President Kenyatta doesn't win this election, then they're going to be in the streets. So for them, they've got a very strong incentive, and they're doing this in the cover of darkness, so that nobody in the media or any other person establishes what they're doing.
All right, let's get the final thoughts on our political pages segment. Jared Okello. Jared, the story here is about the unrelenting nature of the deputy president on the campaign trail. Is this some energy that you miss in the opposition?
Not at all, not at all. But first things first, I tend to think that the deputy president is a man under siege, or a man under sieke, as one of his tribesmen did say. This is because there are many things that have happened in the recent past, and what he's now trying to engage in is what we call a facade game. First and foremost, just slightly over a week ago, the mother to our president paid a courtesy call to the former president, Daniel Moi. And it is spoken on the streets that one of the things that were discussed, though no one has the exact discussion or minutes of the meeting, was to have, Gideon Moi to replace William Ruto as deputy president. If that is indeed what happened, and it is something that is being considered within the corridors of Jubilee politics, then definitely Deputy President William Ruto has to up the stakes by crisscrossing the nation in order that he looks, a little more expensive, a little juicy, and therefore cannot be easily discarded. Secondly, this took part of the entire week about a baby that is alleged to have been sired by him. That somebody has gone to court to challenge that. He has to do something in order that that story can be taken to the annals of history. And that is why he has renewed energy. He's moving around, trying to confuse the electorate from pinning him down on that part of the discussion. Number three, I would say that, he's actually the one who was championing the election of Amina Mohammed at the AUC in Addis Ababa. He got a chopper, a private chartered plane, to go around the African continent to marshal troops behind her. That fell flat on the face of Jubilee. She never got the position, even though it is claimed that 1.6 billion Kenya shillings was spent. The opposition has not presented the actual figures and hence challenged this, but I know that is coming. So if that is so, having spent that much amount of money and be left by immediate neighbors such as Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, and Rwanda, That therefore presents a headache to him as one who was actually the driving force behind Amina's election. There are many, many things, and that even when NASA was created, the very first stop was in the South Rift, an area perceived to be under the clench of Deputy President William Ruto. So this is a man under Siake, and he has to really move so swiftly to firstly solidify his base and at the same time make his name look juicy in the national platform, Ben.
Not Jared. You disagree with something that Jared was saying. What was that?
Well, he says that the NASA Accord does not miss the energy of William Samoei Ruto. Anybody who is saying in the opposition that they do not miss his energy obviously is lying. The deputy president has got so much energy, and we also understand he doesn't enjoy his drink, so he's alert 24 hours. So this is somebody that you can deploy over a short space of time and cover. I mean, if he's been able to do all these 16 stops in a short space of time, that's an asset that you need in your corner. And they suspect code wherever they are, they're in deep regrets that they don't have somewhere in the corner. That's number one. And then number two, he's very good in doing propaganda. Over the last few weeks, he's been talking about 70% plus one. And that propaganda message seems to be sinking into people's psyche that this is the way Jubilee is going to run the show. Number three, he's been able to position NASA and Accord as people who don't know where they're going. They're rudderless, they're leaderless, they have no idea of what is happening in Kenya. That's the kind of energy you need during this campaign. And the allegations about the Deputy President Ruto and a certain baby, I mean, that only came a few days ago. And I doubt whether that one would be a reason enough to give Ruto this energy. Because he's had this energy from the time he was in Youth for Kanu. All these years, he's had this high level, actually, octane energy. So I don't think the idea of Abi or anything else is the one which has woken him from a slumber.
All right, away from Abi, probably the most famous baby the last few days. So we leave it on the political pages, but on the Sunday Nation, the Splash NASA Show of Might. That's what we talk about next, in the next 1 hour or so. We'll talk about the opposition coalition, the National Super Alliance, held its first joint political rally in the South Rift. That is, of course, a stronghold of the Jubilee coalition that is in the county of Bomet. They were hosted by the Bomet governor, Isaac Ruto. After this break, when we return, we'll try to analyze some of the speeches, some of the things that were said there, the political impact of that on the NASA momentum that has been gaining in the last few days, and of course, what impact it has on Jubilee. Many thanks for staying with us here on Sunday edition. Don't go too far.